Arben Krasniqi's name surfaced first, a quiet accountant who knew every hidden account and offshore transfer. But it was Dryden Malaku, the elusive mastermind never seen in public, whose shadow stretched across London's darkest corners, proving that the Albanian Mafia's grip on the city was far deeper than anyone imagined. London's nightlife glittered with neon lights, but beneath the surface something darker spread through the city's veins. A string of unsolved crimes, drug shipments, hidden gambling rooms, and sudden disappearances baffled police for years. Investigators whispered about a new force shaping the streets, the Albanian Mafia. They operated quietly at first, slipping into existing gangs, offering protection and moving contraband along the River Thames. Each act of violence was swift and calculated, leaving no witnesses. Detectives noticed a pattern. Every major bust failed at the last moment, as if someone inside the system was tipping them off. The first signs appeared in small neighborhoods where property prices were low and residents kept to themselves. Local shopkeepers noticed strangers arriving late at night, unloading unmarked crates from vans with foreign plates. When a few brave citizens reported the activity, their businesses were vandalized within days. Police patrols increased, but nothing ever led to an arrest. Officers found themselves chasing shadows, dealing with anonymous tips that turned out to be false, while the real criminals moved unnoticed. Soon the organization reached into London's vibrant nightlife. Popular clubs became convenient hubs for laundering cash and distributing imported narcotics. The drugs were unusually pure, attracting wealthy partygoers and making the gang's product the most sought after in the city. Owners who refused cooperation faced sudden inspections, mysterious fires, or violent break-ins. Those who agreed to stay silent prospered overnight. The streets around these clubs changed, with luxury cars parked outside and security teams that answered to no one but their hidden employers. As months passed, the city's underworld began to shift. Older crime families who once controlled certain boroughs either vanished or struck uneasy deals. The newcomers brought a level of discipline that frightened even seasoned criminals. Their operations were run like a business, with coded messages, encrypted phones, and constant movement to avoid surveillance. Detectives found their suspects always one step ahead, as if someone inside the police force was feeding them information. Rumors grew that the shadowy network had connections far beyond London. Freight containers arrived from distant ports without inspection, and cash moved through offshore accounts before anyone could trace it. For the people living in affected areas, the changes were subtle but undeniable. Streets grew quieter, neighbors disappeared, and a sense of dread settled over everyday life. By the time authorities realized the scale of the threat, the Albanian Mafia had already woven itself into the fabric of the city, invisible but everywhere, ready to strike whenever challenged. The organization built its empire through a clever web of legal businesses that masked its criminal heart. At first, the ventures seemed harmless: luxury car dealerships, small shipping companies, and exclusive nightclubs catering to London's wealthy. Each storefront offered a respectable face to the public while quietly moving illicit money. Cars purchased in cash were resold abroad, creating a perfect loop for laundering profits. Nightclubs operated as high-end traps, where drugs flowed freely behind velvet ropes, and private rooms doubled as meeting places for international traffickers. Shipping firms provided the final piece, bringing in unmarked containers filled with narcotics and counterfeit goods, slipping past inspections with ease. Young men from remote Albanian villages were drawn in with promises of legitimate work and quick earnings. They arrived expecting steady jobs but soon found themselves trapped in a cycle of debt, their passports taken, their choices reduced to obedience or danger. Some became couriers, carrying cash or drugs across Europe, while others worked security at the gang's clubs and warehouses. Their loyalty was ensured through a mixture of intimidation and a sense of belonging to something powerful. The leaders behind these operations remained ghosts. They used only code names and communicated through layers of trusted lieutenants. Orders traveled through encrypted apps and disposable phones, changing constantly to evade detection. Even those who worked for them rarely saw their faces. Rumors described them as men who had fought in old Balkan conflicts, hardened by war and skilled in secrecy. Police surveillance teams often found their efforts undone. When investigators planned a raid on a suspected drug warehouse, the site would be emptied hours before. When financial crime units tracked suspicious bank activity, accounts were closed and money vanished into offshore havens. This pattern suggested that the group enjoyed protection from insiders with access to sensitive information. Some officers began to suspect bribery within their own ranks, while others whispered about influential figures in politics and finance who might be shielding the operation. The public remained unaware of the full scale. To most Londoners, these businesses were just part of the city's constant churn of wealth and nightlife. Yet hidden within the glowing lights of Mayfair clubs and along the quiet docks of the Thames, the Albanian Mafia tightened its grip, expanding its reach into every corner of the capital without ever showing its true face. Violence erupted when rival gangs began to challenge the expanding empire. It started with small skirmishes, graffiti warnings on walls, late-night fistfights outside clubs, but quickly escalated into something far more brutal. Shootings broke out in crowded markets, and unexplained arson attacks destroyed warehouses in wealthy neighborhoods. Residents who once felt safe began to hurry home before dusk, while shopkeepers installed extra locks and security cameras. The city felt tense, as if an invisible storm hovered over every street. Yet the public knew little of the true cause behind this wave of fear. News outlets reported the crimes as isolated incidents, avoiding any mention of organized networks. Journalists who dug deeper faced intimidation. One reporter found her apartment ransacked with nothing stolen, a silent message to stay quiet. Another received anonymous calls warning of consequences if certain names appeared in print. Despite these threats, a few persistent investigators continued to trace the links between violent outbreaks and a single hidden source of power. Police records began to show a troubling pattern. Surveillance cameras captured masked men leaving crime scenes with military precision, but footage often disappeared from evidence rooms before analysis. Witnesses changed their stories or vanished completely. Some detectives suspected corruption, believing someone inside the force was erasing leads. Rumors spread that high-ranking officers were either paid off or too frightened to act. Behind the scenes, the Albanian Mafia pushed deeper into legitimate industries. Construction projects across the city became convenient fronts for secret meetings and money transfers. Private security firms, some hired by well-known property developers, quietly answered to the same criminal network. Building sites with heavy machinery and constant movement were perfect places to exchange illicit goods without attracting suspicion. The atmosphere across London shifted in subtle but unmistakable ways. Neighbors avoided eye contact, and once busy streets fell eerily silent at night. Wealthy neighborhoods hired extra patrols, while poorer areas felt abandoned by law enforcement. The city's underground economy grew stronger, its influence reaching into businesses, real estate, and even local politics. What had begun as whispers of a foreign gang had evolved into a force capable of reshaping London itself, a power hidden behind respectable storefronts and guarded secrets. Each violent act was not random, but part of a calculated strategy to keep the population fearful and the authorities guessing, ensuring that the organization remained untouchable even as chaos unfolded in plain sight. A sudden betrayal from within shifted the balance of power and exposed cracks in the empire's careful design. For years, the Albanian Mafia had seemed untouchable, but one of its own decided the risk of silence was greater than the danger of speaking out. He was an accountant who managed the flow of millions, a man whose calm precision kept the organization's finances hidden behind layers of offshore accounts and shell companies. When anonymous threats reached his family, messages that hinted at harm if he failed to complete a particularly risky transfer, fear outweighed loyalty. Quietly, he contacted investigators and offered to reveal everything in exchange for protection. His testimony opened doors that authorities had long believed sealed shut. He described complex networks of bank accounts spread across Europe and the Caribbean, where money from London's drug trade and illegal gambling was laundered into legitimate investments. He named politicians who had unknowingly accepted donations tied to these funds and detailed how bribes kept shipping routes free of inspection. Documents and digital records confirmed his claims, giving law enforcement a roadmap to follow. Raids began before dawn across the city. Luxury flats in Mayfair, once the private playgrounds of the organization's leaders, were stormed by armed teams. Abandoned warehouses along the docks revealed hidden rooms behind false walls, stacked with forged passports, unregistered firearms, and bundles of cash sealed in vacuum-packed bags. Properties believed to be ordinary businesses turned out to be covert command centers with encrypted communication systems and concealed escape routes. The evidence was overwhelming, and for the first time in years, the gang's senior figures faced the possibility of exposure. International cooperation followed quickly. Financial agencies in Switzerland, Cyprus, and Panama froze suspicious accounts linked to the group. European police forces launched parallel investigations, tracing how profits from London's black market funded political campaigns and real estate projects abroad. The public, unaware of the full scale until now, watched headlines describe a global conspiracy operating in plain sight. But even as the crackdown intensified, a sense of unease lingered. Key leaders remained missing, their identities still hidden behind code names and layers of deception. For every arrest, another high-ranking figure seemed to vanish without a trace. The accountant's revelations had shaken the empire, but whispers suggested that the most powerful members had long prepared for such a crisis, ready to rebuild before authorities could declare victory. Despite the sweeping raids and international headlines, the empire did not collapse. Police celebrated arrests and seizures, yet those victories felt hollow as key figures melted into the shadows. The organization had planned for this moment, scattering leadership across Europe long before the first warrant was signed. Safe houses in quiet suburbs stood empty when officers arrived. Encrypted communication networks went silent overnight, replaced by new systems beyond the reach of investigators. It was as if the group had shed one layer of skin and emerged untouched beneath. London's criminal landscape shifted again. Within weeks, fresh shipments of drugs and counterfeit goods appeared in markets and clubs once believed dismantled. The public saw a brief lull in violence, then a sudden return to the same patterns of intimidation and silent control. Businesses that had faced closure reopened under new management with suspiciously similar methods. Even as detectives traced hidden bank accounts and offshore transactions, money continued to flow through unseen channels. Rumors spread of a deeper leadership circle that had never been exposed. Some called it the Second Family, an inner council that directed operations while the more visible lieutenants served as disposable shields. Whispers suggested these figures lived far from London, operating through intermediaries who did not even know their real names. The possibility unsettled investigators, who realized the original crackdown might have only clipped the organization's outer branches. Meanwhile, the city adapted in ways that revealed the group's lasting influence. Landlords in affected neighborhoods quietly raised rents, driving out longtime residents and making room for businesses tied to hidden investors. Private security firms with vague ownership records expanded their contracts, offering protection that many suspected came from the very people causing the threats. Politicians called for stricter laws, but progress was slow, tangled in bureaucracy and fear of retaliation. For ordinary Londoners, life continued under an unspoken tension. The brightly lit clubs and bustling markets looked unchanged, yet many felt the weight of unseen eyes. Some residents believed the Mafia's retreat was only temporary, a strategic pause before another surge of control. Others accepted the quiet as a fragile peace. In truth, the Albanian network remained embedded in the city's fabric, patient and adaptable. The story that began with whispers and sudden disappearances closed not with justice, but with a reminder that power in the underworld rarely disappears. It simply hides, waiting for the next moment to rise and reclaim the streets that never stopped belonging to it.